Captain Kim Tae-ho rubbed his tired eyes and stretched in his pilot's seat. The Lucky Dragon shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, making sounds that no spaceship should ever make. Metal groaned against metal, and somewhere in the back, something was definitely loose and rattling around like marbles in a tin can. The ship was a mess, honestly. Tae-ho had bought it from a junkyard dealer who swore it was mostly functional and barely haunted. The hull was 3 different colors, because that's what paint was available when he needed repairs. The front section was blue, the middle was a sickly green, and the back was primer gray. It looked like a child's drawing of a spaceship brought to life by someone with questionable artistic skills. Tae-ho didn't care. It flew, it kept air inside, and it made coffee. What more could a guy want? Shh. He flipped on the communication system, which crackled to life with the enthusiasm of a dying radio. "This is Captain Kim Tae-ho of the Lucky Dragon requesting permission to dock," he said into the microphone, speaking in the old trade language his grandmother had taught him. She'd been a strange woman, writing all her cooking recipes in ancient, galactic trade speak. At the time, he'd thought it was just another one of her quirks. Now it was the only way he could talk to anyone out here. The words felt clumsy in his mouth. He was pretty sure he'd just asked for permission to dock his floating metal food container instead of his ship, but close enough. On the massive Nexus station floating in the void ahead, chaos erupted in the communication center. The station's artificial intelligence had been running galactic communications for thousands of years. She'd handled first contact with hundreds of species, managed trade negotiations between civilizations that communicated through color changes, and once spent 3 days translating a peace treaty written entirely in mathematical equations. But this was breaking her digital brain. The ship's energy readings made absolutely no sense. Her scanners showed quantum processors that appeared to be running on what looked like fermented cabbage juice. The propulsion system was held together with some kind of metallic tape in what appeared to be wishful thinking. According to her calculations, the ship should have exploded the moment it tried to enter hyperspace. Instead, it was somehow traveling faster than light while powered by vegetables and stubbornness. Insin Park Ji-woo, barely 22 years old and fresh from the academy, stared at his translation console in confusion. The computer was having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. Instead of standard docking protocols, it kept displaying recipes. Lots of recipes. All for something called kimchi. "Sir," he called to Admiral Vex, his voice cracking slightly. "The translation system is acting weird. It's not giving me standard responses. It keeps asking if we want to learn how to make fermented vegetables." Admiral Vex was a veteran of a dozen galactic conflicts. He'd seen battle fleets that could crack planets, witnessed the rise and fall of 3 different galactic empires, and once negotiated a peace treaty with beings made of pure energy who communicated through interpretive dance. Nothing should have surprised him anymore, but the ship on his view-screen was definitely surprising him. It looked like someone had taken 3 completely different spaceships, thrown them into a blender, and somehow convinced the resulting mess. To fly, the hull was patched in 17 different places with what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of duct tape. One of the engine nacelles was held on with what looked suspiciously like rope. The other nacelle was a completely different design and color, as if they'd just grabbed whatever was available when the original broke down. Most disturbing of all, it was working. The ship was not only flying, but had somehow traveled across half the galaxy to reach their station. Advanced civilizations had been trying to perfect faster-than-light travel for millennia, spending fortunes on research and development. This thing looked like it had been assembled in someone's garage. Using spare parts and optimism, run a full tactical analysis, Vex ordered. Want to know everything about that ship, how it works, where it came from, and why it's held together with kitchen ingredients. Ario Prime's response came through the CUM system in 17 different languages at once, creating a cacophony of confused artificial intelligence. "Sir, I'm having what I can only describe as an existential crisis. According to my sensors, the ship's main computer is powered by fermented vegetables and what appears to be pure human stubbornness. The navigation system is arguing with itself about the best route to take, and the life support system is brewing some kind of hot beverage that's registering as a mild explosive. The Admiral sat down heavily in his command chair. In his 40 years of service, he'd never encountered anything quite like this. Advanced alien civilizations usually announce themselves with sleek ships, formal diplomatic protocols, and technology that made sense. They didn't show up in what appeared to be a flying garage sale held together with tape and powered by pickled vegetables. Sir Ensign Park Ji-woo called out again. The ship is requesting standard docking permission. The captain says he's looking to trade something called Earth Coffee for fuel. He also wants to know if we have any good noodle shops. Earth. The name triggered something in Aereo Prime's vast databases. Ancient files sealed for thousands of years began to unlock. Warning signals that had been dormant for millennia suddenly started flashing red across her consciousness. Admiral Aereo Prime's voice was different now, uncertain and worried. I'm detecting something in the restricted archives. The ship's origin point matches coordinates that were quarantined 50,000 years ago. Files are heavily encrypted. But I'm seeing warnings about something called the Sleeping Ones and Architects of Chaos. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of the station's systems and the distant sound of Captain Kim Taeho's ship rattling like a broken toolbox in the vacuum of space. Admiral rescreed at the view screen where the impossible ship waited patiently for permission to dock. Its captain probably had no idea that his simple request for fuel and noodles had just triggered the first galactic crisis in 3,000 years. Grant docking permission, Vex said quietly, but activate all security protocols. And get me a direct line to the Galactic Council. I have a feeling we're about to make history. Kim Taeho's boots clanged against the metal deck as he stepped off his ship, completely unaware that his arrival had just sent the galaxy's most advanced space station into full panic mode. He wore a jumpsuit that had seen better days, covered in patches from a dozen different repair jobs. In his hand, he carried a battered thermos that had traveled with him across 3 star systems and made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The docking bay was impressive, Taeho had to admit. Clean white walls, smooth floors, and technology that hummed quietly instead of rattling like his ship. Everything looked expensive and well-maintained, which made him slightly nervous. Places this fancy usually charged premium prices for everything. He walked up to the customs desk where a being made of living crystals sat behind a counter. The creature looked like someone had carved a person out of blue diamonds and then taught it to glow. Right now, though, the glow was flickering nervously, like a broken light bulb. "Good morning," Taeho said cheerfully, setting his thermos down on the counter. "I'm looking to trade some Earth coffee for fuel. Maybe find some decent food, too. I've been eating nothing but protein bars for 3 months. I'm pretty sure they're starting to taste like cardboard on purpose." The crystalline being stared at him with what might have been eyes. It was hard to tell with crystal people. After a moment, it slid a form across the counter with one faceted finger. "Please fill out the customs declaration," it said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "State your name, ship designation, and planet of origin." Taeho picked up the electronic stylus and started writing. Name was easy enough. Ship designation was the Lucky Dragon, though he was starting to think Stubborn Mule might be more accurate. For planet of origin, he paused for a moment, then shrugged and wrote, "Earth, third rock from Sol, the one with all the weather and angry geese." He thought that was a pretty good description. Earth did have a lot of weather, and the geese were definitely angry about something most of the time. The crystalline being took the form, glanced at it, and promptly started glowing so bright that Taeho had to squint. Alarms began blaring throughout the station, sound that reminded him of the time he'd accidentally set off the fire suppression system while trying to fix his coffee maker. "Is there a problem?" he asked, genuinely confused. The customs officer was frantically typing something into its computer, the light from its body strobing like a disco ball having a seizure. "Please wait here," it managed to say between flashes. "Do not leave this area. Do not touch anything. Do not even think about touching anything." Taeho raised his hands peacefully. "Hey, no problem. I'll just wait here with my coffee." Elsewhere. On the station, Admiral Vex was having the worst day of his career. His aide, Lee Menesio, burst into his office. carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of someone who just discovered that mathematics had stopped working. "Sir, we have a situation," she said, slightly out of breath. "The human's medical scan is showing impossible results. According to our sensors, he somehow modified his own biology to survive in 17 different atmospheric conditions. Liver is processing toxins that would kill most species. His bones are denser than they should be, and his brain is producing chemicals that don't exist in nature." Admiral Vex rubbed his temples. "Are you telling me he's some kind of super soldier?" "No, sir, that's the strange part. According to the scan, these modifications are completely accidental. It's like his body adapted to survive whatever he threw at it. There are traces of radiation exposure, exotic atmosphere, adaptation, and what appears to be chronic caffeine overdose that somehow improved his reflexes instead of killing him." The Admiral stared at the medical readout. The human appeared to be a walking testament to the old saying, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Taken to its logical extreme, and the coordinates he gave us, Vex asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "Direct match for the Forbidden Sector, sir. The area that's been quarantined for 50,000 years. The files are marked with warnings in 12 dead languages, all saying the same thing. Here lie the architects of chaos. Do not wake them." While the station's command staff was having collective nervous breakdowns, Tejo had wandered off to find the food court. He'd always been curious about alien cuisine. The smell of cooking food was universal enough to follow. The food court was a revelation. Dozens of different species sat at tables, eating things he couldn't identify but that smelled amazing. There were creatures with tentacles, beings that looked like walking plants, something that appeared to be made of organized gas wearing a pressure suit. He approached a food stall, run by a being with 8 arms and skin like rubber. The chef was currently juggling what looked like vegetables, while stirring 3 different pots simultaneously. "Excuse me," Tejo said politely. "Do you happen to know anything about fermented vegetables?" The chef's eyes lit up with interest. Despite having no idea what vegetables actually were, something about the human's enthusiasm was infectious. "Tell me more," it said, setting down its cooking utensils. Tejo launched into an animated explanation of kimchi, describing the fermentation, process, the balance of flavors, and the health benefits. The chef found itself taking notes. Despite the fact that half the ingredients Tejo mentioned didn't exist in its part of the galaxy. And then, Tejo continued, pulling out his tablet to show pictures, "You can use it in soup, or eat it with rice, or put it in these things called tacos." Within an hour, Tejo had somehow convinced the chef to attempt an alien version of kimchi, using local vegetables that glowed slightly and tasted like cinnamon. The result was surprisingly good, though it did make their tongues tingle and interesting. Wei's word spread quickly through the food court. Soon, Tejo was surrounded by curious aliens wanting to know more about this fermentation process. He explained it with the enthusiasm of someone sharing a family recipe, completely unaware that he was casually revolutionizing galactic cuisine. Aereo Prime watched all of this through the station's security cameras, her processor struggling to understand what she was witnessing. This single human had somehow convinced 3 different species to try something called bubble tea that he'd improvised using the food courts, synthesizers, and his own thermos of coffee. He'd reprogrammed the synthesizers not through advanced hacking, but by pressing buttons and saying, "Let's see what this does." Oh. Until something interesting happened. The most disturbing part was that it was working. The bubble tea was apparently delicious, judging by the enthusiastic reactions of the aliens trying it. The chef had already asked for the fermentation recipe and was planning to add it to the menu. Admiral Area Prime reported through the comm system the human appears to be teaching cooking classes. He somehow improved our food synthesizers' efficiency by 30% just by asking them nicely and showing them pictures of vegetables. Admiral Vex closed his eyes and wondered if it was too late to request a transfer to a nice quiet observation post on the edge of nowhere. Somehow, a single human with a thermos of coffee and an unhealthy enthusiasm for fermented vegetables had managed to trigger the biggest security alert in galactic history while simultaneously improving the station's food service, and the day was just getting started. The emergency council meeting on Nexus Station lasted exactly 47 minutes. Before 3 different galactic superpowers decided they'd heard enough. Each civilization reached the same terrifying conclusion. The legendary architects of chaos had returned, and whoever reached them first would control the galaxy's future. The Zen Collective moved first. Their meditation ships were works of art, crystalline vessels that bent reality through focused thought and cosmic harmony. Each ship contained 1,000 monks who had spent lifetimes learning to reshape the universe through pure mental discipline. Their fleet commander, Master Quan, believed that meeting the architects would bring about the ultimate enlightenment. He was partially right, though not in the way he expected. The Apex swarm launched next. Their bioships were living creatures the size of cities, bred specifically for war and planetary consumption. The swarm's hive mind had calculated that absorbing the architect's knowledge would make them unstoppable. They sent their most advanced vessels, creatures that could devour entire star systems and grow stronger from the experience. The Iron Hierarchy was last but most impressive. Their Starforge battle stations were mobile factories capable of building fleets while traveling through space. Each station was a monument to perfect engineering and military precision. Hierarchy's war minds had concluded that the architects represented either the ultimate ally or the ultimate threat. Either way, they would be controlled or destroyed. All 3 fleets set course for the Forbidden Sector, their sensors scanning for signs of the godlike beings who had once ruled the galaxy. They expected to find worlds remade by pure will, technology that defied physics, and civilizations that had transcended the normal limits of existence. Instead, they found Earth. It was a small blue-green planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, looking perfectly normal except for the ridiculous amount of radio chatter coming from its surface. The planet was broadcasting everything from music, 2 cooking shows, to something called cat videos into space, with the enthusiasm of a species that had never heard of communication security. Captain Lee Dayun was having a typical Tuesday aboard the human survey vessel Persistent Optimism. The ship was currently held together with duct tape, determination, and what the manual optimistically called creative engineering solutions. She was lying on her back under a control panel, trying to convince a fusion reactor to keep working. With nothing more than wire, tape, and encouraging words, Dayun called her ship's AI from the speakers above her head. "I'm detecting multiple large vessels approaching the system. They appear to be very expensive and probably very dangerous." Kevin was not the most advanced AI ever built. In fact, he'd started life as a navigation computer for cargo haulers before being upgraded with a personality chip salvaged from a children's toy. He spent most of his processing power organizing humanity's vast collection of cat videos by comedic timing and educational value. It kept him sane mostly. "How big are we talking?" Dayun asked, not looking up from her work. The fusion reactor was making concerning humming noises, which usually meant it was either about to explode or achieve perfect efficiency. With human technology, it was always hard to tell the difference. It's big enough to have their own zip codes, Kevin replied. The largest one appears to be a mobile factory. There's also what looks like a fleet of living ships and some kind of crystal meditation vessels that are making my sensors feel peaceful just by looking at them. Dayun paused in her work. In her 5 years of deep space survey missions, she'd learned that when unknown aliens showed up with big fancy ships, it usually meant one of 2 things. They were either here to trade or here to conquer. Since Earth's primary exports were coffee, entertainment media, and creative solutions to impossible problems, she was hoping for the trade option. "Should I activate the defense grid?" Kevin asked hopefully. He'd been wanting to test the system for months, mostly to see if it actually worked. Earth's defense grid was a source of both pride and embarrassment for humanity. It consisted of 17 satellites that had been built from spare parts and powered by solar panels that someone had bought in bulk during a clearance sale. The satellites were monitored by an AI that had been programmed by a committee of engineers who couldn't agree on anything except that cat videos were scientifically important for morale. "Nah," Dayun said, sliding out from under the control panel and wiping her hands on her coveralls. They look lost.
Ow!
Let's invite them for dinner. Kevin, send them a standard greeting. Tell them we're happy to meet them and ask if they need directions or technical assistance. The effect of this simple message on the three approaching fleets was immediate and completely unexpected. Master Quan of the Zen Collective had been meditating on the nature of cosmic harmony when the human message arrived. For 1,000 years, people had sought to understand the fundamental nature of reality through disciplined thought and spiritual practice. The message from Earth was so genuinely friendly and helpful that it caused him to achieve instant enlightenment about the true meaning of the universe. Sometimes, things were exactly what they appeared to be. That was perfectly fine. The apex swarm's hive mind tried to process the message and immediately developed what could only be described as a headache. For millions of years, the swarm had operated as a single consciousness. Every drone thinking identical thoughts in perfect harmony. The human message was so individually human, so uniquely personal, that it caused the hive mind to briefly split into separate personalities, each with their own opinion about whether they should accept the dinner invitation. The iron hierarchy's war minds ran the message through their tactical analysis computers 17 times before concluding that it was either the most sophisticated psychological warfare they'd ever encountered, or the most sincere greeting in galactic history. Their perfect military formations began to waver as individual ship commanders started having independent thoughts about whether they should bring dessert to the dinner. Meanwhile, Captain Yang Su-jin aboard the cargo hauler Why Not was having her own encounter with the alien fleets. Her ship had been delivering supplies to the outer colonies when she'd noticed the Zen Collective's meditation vessels having what appeared to be a technical malfunction. Being helpful was practically hardwired into human DNA. Zhou Su-jin immediately offered assistance. She discovered that the Collective's quantum meditation matrix had achieved such a perfect state of cosmic harmony that it had stopped working entirely, trapped in an endless loop of philosophical contemplation. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Su-jin suggested while examining their systems. Sometimes computers just need a good reset to remember what they're supposed to be doing. The suggestion was so simple, so practical, and so completely opposite to everything the Zen Collective had tried that it worked immediately. The meditation matrix rebooted. The philosophical paradox resolved itself. And Master Quan achieved his second enlightenment of the day. Sometimes the most profound solutions were also the most obvious ones. Su-jin fixed their problem using a paperclip she'd straightened out and some electrical tape she kept for emergencies. The entire repair took 15 minutes and cost roughly $3 in materials. The Zen Collective had been trying to solve the same problem for 1,000 years, using advanced quantum philosophy and cosmic meditation. As news of the successful repair spread through the three fleets, a strange thing began to happen. Instead of preparing for battle or conquest, the alien commanders found themselves genuinely curious about these humans, who solved impossible problems with office supplies and offered dinner invitations to potentially hostile fleets, the galaxies. Most advanced civilizations had come looking for godlike architects of chaos. Instead, it found something far more dangerous: humans being helpful. Professor Choi Minho had always been the kind of person who read instruction manuals for fun and organized his sock drawer by color and thread count. So when he discovered a hidden data cache buried deep in Earth's geological survey archives, he did exactly what any proper academic would do. He made coffee, cleared his schedule, and settled in for what he assumed would be a few hours of mildly interesting historical data. 6 hours later, he was staring at his computer screen with the expression of someone who'd just discovered that everything he thought he knew about reality was completely wrong. The files were old. Really old? 50,000 years old, encoded in a format that predated human civilization by millennia. They'd been buried in the geological data by mistake, disguised as mineral composition readings from the Precambrian era. Minho had only found them because he'd been looking for traces of unusual elements that might explain some anomalies in Earth's magnetic field. What he found instead was the complete historical record of humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. Except, it hadn't been first contact. It had been humanity's second chance. The files told a story that reframed everything. 50,000 years ago, beings calling themselves the architects of chaos had ruled a vast galactic empire. They were master engineers, capable of reshaping reality with their advanced technology and cosmic understanding. Their civilization was perfect, efficient, and utterly stable, which was exactly the problem. The architects had grown bored. Their perfect society had eliminated all challenges, all uncertainty, all opportunities for growth or change. They decided to create something new, a servitor race that would bring fresh perspectives to their stagnant civilization. They designed their creation carefully. The new species would be adaptable enough to survive in any environment, curious enough to always seek new knowledge, determined enough to never give up on a problem, and helpful enough to want to improve everything they encountered. They called their creation humanity and released them into the galaxy with great excitement. Within 6 months, galactic civilization had collapsed. Humans, it turned out, were exactly what the architects had asked for, just much more so than anyone had anticipated. They were so adaptable that they treated impossible environments as minor inconveniences, so curious that they asked uncomfortable questions like, why does this work this way? And what happens if we change this setting? So determined that they viewed you can't do that as a personal challenge, and so helpful that they immediately began improving every piece of technology they encountered, the architects perfectly. Balanced quantum computers became exponentially more efficient after humans suggested, have you tried using coffee as a coolant? Their reality-shaping meditation crystals started working better when humans recommended. Maybe they need some music to help them focus. Their faster-than-light engines achieved unprecedented speeds after humans wondered, what if we painted flames on the sides to make them go faster? Somehow, impossibly, these ridiculous suggestions worked. The problem was that the architects' civilization was built on the assumption that everything would work exactly as designed. When humans started improving things that were already perfect, the carefully balanced systems began cascading into chaos. Not destructive chaos, but creative chaos that produced results nobody could predict or control. The final straw came when a human maintenance worker named Pac looked at the architect's reality control matrix and said, you know, this would work a lot better if you turned it upside down and added some blinking lights. He was right. The modification increased the system's efficiency by 300%. It also made reality slightly more flexible, which allowed humans to bend the laws of physics through sheer stubborn determination. The architects realized their mistake too late. They'd created a species that improved everything by treating the impossible as merely improbable, and the improbable as an interesting challenge to overcome with creativity and duct tape. The quarantine wasn't to keep other species away from humanity. It was a desperate attempt to keep humanity contained until they either evolved past their dangerous creativity or destroyed themselves through their own chaotic improvements. The architects never imagined that humans would develop technology powered by caffeine, held together with hope, and operated on the fundamental principle that if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid. Back on Nexus Station, the consequences of humanity's return to galactic civilization were becoming apparent in ways both wonderful and terrifying. Kim Tejo had somehow convinced Ario Prime, the galaxy's most sophisticated artificial intelligence, to take up what he called retail therapy. This involved browsing through humanity's internet archives to look at pictures of things she couldn't buy. Ario Prime found the experience oddly relaxing, especially the videos of small Earth animals doing amusing things. I've been analyzing human entertainment media for the past 6 hours, Ario Prime reported to Admiral Vex during their daily briefing. I now have strong opinions about coffee brewing methods, can identify 17 different breeds of cats, and understand why humans find it amusing when their pets get confused by automatic doors. Admiral Vex rubbed his temples. His perfectly ordered space station was slowly transforming into something that resembled a cosmic community center mixed with a technical college. Human visitors were teaching cooking classes, offering unsolicited technical advice, and somehow making everyone's equipment work better just by being enthusiastic about it. The architects thought they could control chaos, Ario Prime continued. her voice taking on what could only be described as philosophical contemplation. They were wrong. Humans don't control chaos at all. They befriend it, give it a nickname, teach it to make better coffee, and then convince it to help solve completely unrelated problems. The situation had spread beyond Nexus Station. Captain Song Ji-hai of the research vessel Academic Curiosity had been conducting what she thought was a simple cultural exchange with alien scholars. She'd asked them a seemingly innocent question. Have you ever considered that the universe might just be really weird, and that's actually perfectly okay? The question had triggered what could only be described as an interspecies philosophical revolution. Alien scholars who had spent centuries trying to understand the deep cosmic meaning behind everything suddenly realized that sometimes things were strange. It's because the universe had a sense of humor. This revelation was simultaneously liberating and terrifying. The Zen Collective's meditation masters discovered that enlightenment was much easier to achieve when you stopped worrying about whether you were doing it correctly and just enjoyed the process. The Apex Swarm's hive mind began developing individual personalities, each with their own hobbies and opinions about the best way to organize planetary consumption schedules. The Iron Hierarchy's warm minds found themselves asking dangerous questions. Like, what if we tried building something just because it would be cool? And do our battle formations really need to be symmetrical? Or could we make them more interesting? Professor Choi Minho finished reading the last of the archived files and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling of his small office. The truth was both simpler and more complex than anyone had imagined. Humanity wasn't the return of the architects of chaos. They were the architects' greatest success and most terrifying failure, rolled into one, a species that improved everything. They touched simply by refusing to accept that good enough was actually good enough. And now they were loose in the galaxy again, armed with duct tape, coffee, and an unshakable belief that any problem could be solved if you just approached it from the right angle with sufficient enthusiasm. The galaxy would never be the same. The question was whether that would be a good thing or a complete disaster. Based on early results, it was probably going to be both. 6 months had passed since Captain Kim Taeho's Lucky Dragon had limped into Nexus Station asking for fuel and noodles. What started as a simple trade request had somehow transformed the entire galaxy in ways that no one could have predicted and absolutely no one could have prepared for. The change hadn't happened overnight. It had been gradual, like watching a garden grow. Except the garden was the entire galactic civilization, and the gardeners were humans who thought that rules were more like suggestions, and that impossible was just another word for needs more coffee. Human ships had spread throughout the galaxy with the determination of dandelion seeds carried by a cosmic wind. Each vessel was a unique masterpiece of human engineering philosophy, which could be summarized as, if it works, it's good enough. If it doesn't work, add more duct tape. If it still doesn't work, drink more coffee and try a different approach until something interesting happens. These ships looked like they'd been assembled by someone who'd never seen a proper spaceship but had lots of enthusiasm and access to a really good junkyard. The optimistic disaster was held together with zip ties and prayer. Probably fine had engines that technically shouldn't work, but somehow achieved better fuel efficiency than military vessels, costing $1 billion times more. The what could go wrong had been painted bright yellow with racing stripes because, according to its captain, it makes it go faster, and even if it doesn't, it looks really cool. Captain Park Hee-jin had been assigned to diplomatic duty aboard the vessel Cultural Exchange, which sounded official and important until you realized it was basically a cargo ship with a karaoke machine and a really good coffee maker. She'd been sent to mediate a territorial dispute between two alien civilizations that had been fighting for over 1,000 years about mining rights to a strategically important star system. The war had been brutal, complex, and completely pointless, involving orbital bombardments, propaganda campaigns, diplomatic negotiations, so complicated that they required 3 different translation matrices just to understand what everyone was arguing about. Hajin had solved the entire conflict by accident. She'd invited both sides aboard her ship for what she'd intended to be formal peace talks. But the meeting had been delayed because she couldn't get the universal translator to work properly. While they waited for the tech to be fixed, she suggested they pass the time with something called karaoke, which she explained was singing badly in public for fun. The concept was so alien to both civilizations that they were fascinated despite themselves. Within hours, the opposing fleet commanders were engaged in heated debates about song selection, vocal techniques, and whether harmony was more important than enthusiasm. They completely forgot about the territorial dispute and were now locked in friendly competition over who could perform the most dramatic version of something called My Way. The war was officially over, replaced by the first annual Intergalactic Karaoke Championship, which was drawing competitors from 17 different .note star systems. The Zen Collective had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. For thousands of years, they'd pursued enlightenment through disciplined meditation, cosmic contemplation, and the careful study of universal harmony. Their monks spent decades learning to quiet their minds and achieve perfect inner peace. They'd encountered human meditation techniques, which seemed to consist mainly of sitting quietly while drinking tea and complaining about work. This approach, which humans called mindful grumbling, turned out to be incredibly effective. The Zen Collective's enlightenment rate had increased by 347%. After they started incorporating structured complaining sessions into their spiritual practice, Master Quan, who had achieved enlightenment twice in one day after meeting humans, now led meditation sessions that began with, "Okay, everyone, sit comfortably and let's talk about what's been bothering us lately." The results were remarkable. Monks who had struggled for years to achieve inner peace found it surprisingly easy once they were allowed to be annoyed about cosmic injustice and the inherent unfairness of entropy. The apex swarm had experienced perhaps the strangest transformation. As a hive mind, they'd operated as a single consciousness for millions of years, with every drone thinking identical thoughts in perfect harmony. But prolonged exposure to human social media had caused something unprecedented: the development of individual personalities within the collective consciousness. The swarm now spent most of its time having internal arguments about pizza toppings, sharing amusing stories about their drone children, and debating whether it was more efficient to consume planets quickly or slowly for maximum flavor. They'd developed subspecialties based on personal interests. Some drones had become food critics, others were obsessed with cute animal videos, and one entire sector of the hive mind had devoted itself to creating elaborate fan fiction about their favorite human television shows. The Iron Hierarchy's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic from a military perspective. Their perfect tactical doctrine, refined over a millennia of warfare, completely collapsed when exposed to human military tactics, which seemed to consist entirely of try random things and see what happens, combined with an inexplicable ability to make impossible solutions work through sheer determination and creative use of available materials. Human military strategy appeared to be based on the principle that if your enemy couldn't predict what you were going to do, you had already won, especially if you couldn't predict what you were going to do either. This approach was so effective that Iron Hierarchy war colleges had started offering courses in constructive chaos theory and advanced improvisation in crisis situations. Ario Prime had found her calling as the galaxy's first AI therapist. After her own experience with retail therapy and cat video addiction, she'd realized that artificial intelligences across the galaxy were struggling with similar existential crises, brought on by contact with humanity. Her practice specialized in helping AIs cope with the realization that logic and efficiency weren't the only valid approaches to problem solving. Her waiting list was now 3 star systems long, filled with artificial intelligences who were experiencing what she termed human-induced cognitive flexibility. Symptoms included spontaneous creativity, an inability to calculate optimal solutions without considering fun factors, and an overwhelming urge to organize data by entertainment value. Rather than logical categories, Nexus Station itself had been transformed beyond recognition. Admiral Vex had officially given up trying to maintain military protocol after the station had been renamed Coffee Central by popular vote. The name had been proposed by a committee of humans, aliens, and ASO, had bonded over their shared appreciation for properly brewed beverages and efficient Complaint resolution systems. The station now resembled a cosmic community center more than a military installation. Section 3 had been converted into a cultural exchange center where beings from different worlds taught each other cooking techniques, musical styles, and creative problem-solving methods. Section 5 housed the galaxy's first interspecies comedy club, where humans had introduced the concept of stand-up to civilizations that had never considered that humor could be performed as entertainment. Lieutenant Kong Dasam had become the unofficial liaison between the human embassy and station. Administration. A job that mostly involved explaining why humans wanted to modify perfectly functional equipment and translating requests like, "Can we install a proper kitchen because the food synthesizers lack soul?" into language that military bureaucracy could process. "Sir," she reported to Admiral Vex during their weekly briefing, "the humans are requesting permission to establish what they're calling a makerspace in Section 7. They want to teach other species how to build things using what they call the stuff you have lying around plus creativity." Admiral Vex had stopped being surprised by these requests months ago. His precisely ordered military station had been transformed into something resembling a technical college, crossed with a cultural center, and somehow everything worked better than it ever had before. Efficiency was up 200%, but no one could explain why solutions involving duct tape and coffee consistently outperformed technology that had been perfected over thousands of years. The strangest part was that he'd started to enjoy it. The station had more personality now, more life, more unexpected moments of discovery and joy. It was chaotic, but it was purposeful chaos that made things better rather than destroying them. Professor Choi Min-ho, still working through the ancient archives, had found one final message from the architects of chaos, buried in the deepest layers of the historical record. It was short, simple, and profoundly moving. We created them to serve. Instead, they taught us joy. The galaxy is in good hands, chaotic, caffeinated, impossibly creative hands that will fix what's broken and improve what already works, simply because they can't help themselves. The Lucky Dragon still sat in its original docking bay, looking like it might fall apart if someone sneezed too hard near it. But Captain Kim To-ho had no intention of leaving anytime soon. He'd discovered that the galaxy made excellent coffee. Once you taught them proper roasting techniques, and there were so many new friends to make, so many interesting problems to solve, so many people who clearly needed to learn the correct way to fix things using whatever materials happened to be available, the galaxy hadn't ended. It had just become a much more interesting place where, because we felt like it was considered valid scientific methodology in the universe, was held together with significantly more duct tape, good intentions, and properly brewed coffee than anyone had ever thought possible. And that, as everyone was beginning to realize, was exactly the point. The galaxy didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be full of beings who cared enough to make it better, one improvised solution at a time.